With us today is Simon Chrystal, CEO of WPS Advisory, a leading independent advisory firm specialising in retirement planning advice. With a focus on navigating the complexities of pension planning, WPS Advisory offers invaluable expertise to those seeking to make informed decisions about their financial future. This expertise in retirement planning has recently been recognised by Pan Finance, having been named the UK's best retirement advisory. Simon, thank you so much for being here today.
Lovely to meet you.
So WPS Advisory is a relatively new company, which has clearly achieved a lot in a short space of time. Could you tell us a little bit about the vision underpinning what was effectively a startup back in 2015 and how you got WPS off the ground?
To explain the vision, I really need to take a step back into what was there before and our view on that. And historically, or typically in our view, financial advice was largely male dominated. It was not really financial advice, it was financial sales. You had firms which were distributors moving products of other larger firms like insurance companies. Yeah. And the construct would be is almost a range of questions designed to elicit answers which would then be suitable to sell the product that was in your briefcase, right? And that's what it was. And that resulted in a situation where we have evidence of this. Regular individuals would recognize the need and the importance of having financial advice, but would not use financial advisors because they just didn't trust them, right? They felt that if you went in and you talked to them, you were just there to sell them something. And you know what? They were right. That was true. Whether the industry likes it or not, right? That was true. And it was wrong, okay? So when we look at the vision for the business, in terms of change making, it was to change that. And then you've got to look at how you categorize that in creating that change. And the first one is you've got to create trust, right? Yeah. Now that's hard to be able to do. It's even harder to be able to maintain. And that was really around connecting with individuals, communicating with individuals, and ensuring that they understood what you were saying, okay? There was this almost misconception that the responsibility of a financial advisor was to deliver what's called a personal recommendation. That's advice in normal language, if you like. But actually that was not the obligation. The obligation was to deliver an informed decision and to evidence that informed decision, to show that you understood what you were doing, why you were doing it, and to make sure you understood what the risks were. So trust was a big thing. We had to really win that trust by showing we knew what we were doing, not first of all to the people that we wanted to talk to, but because we were going to specialise in advice via the workplace, because regular people didn't really have access to advice, right? It was sold on the high street, largely by individuals that wanted to take a cut of someone else's wealth by blowing smoke up their backside, right? Here, what we had to be able to do is to prove to really large companies or big firms of trustees or individual trustees that we knew what we were doing, so doing the job properly. Right? Yeah. So we actually had to go and prove to them, and we have to all of the time in our job, prove to them that we knew what we were doing. And if you can do that, then you build up reputation. So you've got trust, you've got reputation. To do it differently, you've got to innovate, right? And the innovation is really it's communication. It's how we interacted with and engaged with individuals so that they believed we could be trusted, and then we delivered to that trust, which was really about them understanding that we talk to them as if we would talk to a mate in the pub or a partner or whoever that is. And those were the key areas. And the vision really was initially to get an undue market share for a small company and to build from that. I'd love to tell you that we thought we were going to get to be the leading provider in that space, but we didn't. And I genuinely think that the strength of the team and the strength of and the passion of the team to do the right thing by individuals is what drove that. And I'm lucky enough to be sat there actually with a posh title presiding over people who want to do the right thing. Great. You know, what more could you want?
Yeah. You've said it's a very highly regulated sector. So from startup to becoming market leaders in this specialised and highly regulated sector, what would you say are the most notable challenges and achievements that WPS Advisory have had?
Where we provide advice and specialise is advice via the workplace. So some very, very large employers or pension schemes would have to trust us to appoint us before they gave us access to talk to a regular person. So they want to be clear that in actual fact we can do our job properly. Right?
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of diligence and quite a lot of testing that's been developed over the years to ensure that we literally know what we're doing and that we will do it in the right way. There is, in giving retirement advice, particularly there's something called defined benefit schemes or final salary schemes. They've got all sorts of different acronyms attached to them, right? But it's really people's money, but it's got really valuable guarantees attached to that. And there is, you know, the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, were and continue to be particularly concerned as to whether or not advisors are giving people suitable and appropriate levels of advice, particularly if they're considering giving up guarantees. So you've got, the first function is the diligence with the employers in order to get the appointment to get access to their people. The second element is you've got a regulator that's there who's aggressive in this area, particularly given scandals in the past, pensions mis-selling, the British Steel pension scheme, etc. You also have claims management company who are there to jump on if you do anything wrong in that sort of sense. And you've got the Financial Ombudsman Service, and they can all take a different view on whether or not you've given a good piece of advice. What's more important is the ability to evidence that the person made an informed decision. So one of the areas of innovation was identifying it didn't matter that we gave a personal recommendation, right? What mattered was that the person understood what they were doing, and in particular, the risks they were taking if they were investing money or considering giving up guarantees or structuring how they were going to take their retirement benefits, you know, because that could be 30 years. For some people, it's as long as you're working life now.
So you've emphasised the importance of culture, trust, reputation, innovation. How do you substantiate these values? Can you give us an example, for instance, of a key innovation?
I can, but actually you said something there which I missed, which is really the centre of everything, which is culture.
Culture.
And I think that's massively important. And you can overcomplicate culture. And culture is about ensuring that everybody in the team wants to do the right thing by the person that they're speaking to. I'm sorry to say this, but that was actually an innovation in itself. So one of the things we did is none of our advisors had sales targets, and they still don't to this day, right? And they always had sales targets in the past. Another, for me, one of the innovations that I'm most proud of, and there's another one to come, you don't have big ideas very often, and mostly they're pinched from other people, and then they're developed. We introduced a program called Who Am I? And, you know, I've said that actually very often the discussions with an individual were constructed. You would ask them some questions that would lead them into giving answers that allowed you to sell a product that you had in your briefcase. Who Am I does something very different, and it has 5 key questions, right? What's your plan? What's in it for you? What might go wrong? How would you spot it? And what would you do about it? And you get some really, really different types of answers to that. But they're very open questions, and they're designed to get to what the original wants, how they see their life. They're designed to be emotional, right? Because interestingly, if you get somebody to talk about their family, you can't shut them up. If you ask them about their money, they don't want to know, right? So you can't do that way. But importantly, again, they're designed to tell us what their understanding of the risks are, because most people can tell us what they want to do. Right? They can tell us why they want to do it, but when you ask them what can go wrong, then actually they haven't thought that quite through. So that area of saying what risks are you taking, how will you see them emerging, and what will you do about it, the start of the conversations always starts with that individual now under the Who Am I program, and it's absolutely unique. Nobody else does this. Okay. What that allows us to do is we learn first of all the way they talk. Right? The hardest part of communication is thinking that you're doing it better than the person next to you, because that's your style, isn't it? So learning how they want to talk, learning their values, learning their experience of managing money and risk, which is important, how they make decisions, even when they don't realise that they're actually making a decision because it's an implicit behaviour, and learning how that person, if you like, interprets information. So getting that up front in their own words is really powerful. And I'll give you an example. We had one gentleman who, we asked him what might go wrong, and he said, nothing can go wrong, my wife just died. Right? We now know we're dealing with a person who walks in a casino, puts all the money on red, it comes up black, he walks out, and nothing's gone wrong. It's already as bad as it can get for him. And that's one of the more powerful statements that you get, but it tells you about the emotional state of that individual. Now, they do that at the first point. So before they even speak to one of our people, they'll do that. They then will go through the information gathering, learning about them, and we'll build that. And when they speak to our advisor, we'll continue to build that and particularly focus on the things that they didn't necessarily appreciate. At the end of it, right, before we will transact, they have to do it again. So they go in and answer the same 5 questions. And what we find is the plan didn't really change. There's some of life's natural compromises in there. Certainly the reasons why they wanted to do what they want to do stays broadly the same.
Sure.
But their understanding of what might go wrong, how they would spot it and what they would do about it, that's key. And we're very clear on this. If they can't show us that, in actual fact, they understand that, then we won't transact on their behalf because something will happen, right? And they'll not see it, or they'll not understand what's happened. And before we even know about it, because we don't live in their pockets 24/7, a decision gets made and the plan goes wrong. And then that person sat there thinking, well, who's at fault here? So ultimately here, right, it's about the difference in us saying to them, this is what I'm telling you to do because I'm the expert. It's based on my values and my knowledge and my expertise, because the moment something happens, not only will they not see it, they'll make a decision on it, but their decision will reflect who they are, right? Under this environment, right, what they're doing is that they're engaged to understand to look for it because they understand there's a risk to manage, and they're making decisions on their plan, right? That's what being informed is. That's what making an informed decision is. The bottom line is if you don't understand it, you shouldn't do it.
Okay, great. So now it's been built, it's fast-paced, it's exciting, but what's up next for WPS Advisory?
Over the last, since 2015, we've engaged with over 100,000 consumers. From a standing start, we had 3 people, 2 laptops, no customers. So it was interesting.
A little bit different.
And very scary, and not something that I'd ever done before. We've provided over 35,000 pieces of advice and hopefully evidenced 35,000 informed decisions. We do our very best. We want to take that to the next stage, and that breaks up into 2 different avenues. In 2022, we launched a new trading style called One You, who sits and works with all of our ongoing clients. So there are 1,900 people who trust us to provide them with a service and provide us with advice when they need it, or at least annually. So we do an annual update, make sure everything's like it's supposed to be, what's happened, what's changed, how do we deal with that type of thing. And so that now trades in its own right over the course of the last year. And I'm really proud of that, because actually that represents a good portion of the business's revenues, just in helping people that have learned to trust us over time. The next stage for us is the launch of something called Life Stage Advice Strategies, which is a brand new proposition. And it's designed to ramp up this business engine that we've spent 8 years building to make advice more accessible through the workplace. And what we've done is we've constructed that as what's called an employee benefit. So an employer can basically lock it in, fund it, either directly or the individual can fund it through salary sacrifice. It gives people automatically options to access advice at 3 key stages in their life. Joining a company, 15 years out from when you think you're going to retire, and then retirement itself. It also gives them access to discounted and competitive advice for anything else that they need, whether it be an ISA for little Jane, Johnny, Jack, whoever, or themselves, whether it be a mortgage, whether it be a lifetime mortgage, whether it be investments. No matter what it is that they need, we can provide that, but we provide it in that different environment. No sales targets, it's supported through the workplace. Yeah. You're in a position of being trusted, so it's essential that you don't abuse that trust. And actually you're under strict governance when you do that, because the employer will typically have a governance framework in where we have to report who we've spoken to, what it is that we've done for them, whether or not we did it competitively, in that sort of sense. Because one of the biggest drags on outcome, i.e. what's best for you, is the charges from all of the people involved in it. And getting that right is going to be essential, getting that balance right. And the FCA has introduced a new consumer duty that's designed to cause the industry to demonstrate this cultural change that I like to believe we've been at the forefront of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've made significant contributions on an industry level. I'm going to list some. So the Code of Good Practice for Incentive Exercises and the Incentive Exercise Monitoring Board, the Pensions Advice Task Force, which produced the Pension Transfer Gold Standard. WPSA provides the chair to a specialist committee of the Pension Administration Standards Association, which in turn produced best practice guidance and a code on administration of defined benefit transfers. And we've also heard that the Pension Advice Task Force will be picked up again by the Consumer Duty Alliance. So the obvious question is, where do you find the time?
I like the last part of that question because it gives me the opportunity to give credit to the fact that there's a strong team sat around me, you know, and without them, as well as obviously my wife and things like that, you wouldn't get the time. So if they weren't really good at their jobs and playing their part and making it a team, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do these things. But I said at the beginning, we wanted to be a change maker firm. You can't create change without demonstrating you're prepared to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You've got to do that. And the opportunity for me personally and for my colleagues to get involved in delivering and evolving good market practice, it does have commercial return because it helps people trust us, it helps us win work. You know, we can't pretend that there isn't a link in there, and it would be wrong of us to do so. But it's been an absolute joy being involved in some of these evolutions of good practice, because what I find is a lot of people that end up doing financial advice and financial services, the people that are good at it, when they were growing up, they wanted to do good things. They might not have ended up being, in doing good things in the way that they thought they would for a range of reasons, because life plays lots of tricks.
Yeah.
But they actually take a joy here. And we've got one lad, Addy, who's come, into England from a background of, we wouldn't even understand it as to the poor, and he understands the importance of money in people's welfare and things like that, and he's developing through our business. And we've got Samuel, who's joined us, who was in Iran at the time of the Green Revolution, and so they understand the value of how people's lives get put together and things like that. So all of these things help us to do that. With the Pensions Advice Task Force, I was lucky enough to be one of the founder members of that when that was put together originally by the Personal Finance Society, and I'm really pleased to see Keith Richards, not the rock star, reinstating that now. And I thought it was a really positive move to put Margaret Snowden in as the chair. She gets things done, and I think that's important. I'll wait to see, and I'm hopeful that we'll have the opportunity to get involved again, given our track record in the past. But if we are invited to go in there and get involved in it, then we'll be like ferrets up trousers. We'll be in there with all of our enthusiasm. Tell them a northeast lad with the ferrets, and we'll do our best to contribute, because if we do well as an industry and we're focused on what regular people need, we can provide real help in a way that just makes their life easier. Imagine it, if the money's there when you need it, where you're expected it, to do the things that you wanted to do, that's a big thing just in everyday life. The idea that there's some sort of investment nirvana and the rest of it out there, that's not true, right? This is supposed to be about helping people, and that's what we're supposed to do. And that in itself, for me, is an innovation. Both in life stage and in Who Am I, it was focused on people, it was focused on emotion, it was focused on understanding what they wanted and delivering to that to the best of our ability without making false promises.
Brilliant. So finally, could you tell us a little bit more about the nature of your relationship with the DEA Group?
I can, and I'll break that into two separate answers actually. The first one is that they are the shareholder for our business. They're an international company. To the best of my understanding, although you get different opinions, the largest international financial advice company, and they're more diversified there now than they were when I first knew them. When we set this up in 2015, it was me, a fellow founder, Paul Butler, who's moved on, since that time. He's got his own business now in that sense. These things happen. And you couldn't do what we needed to do, having pockets the depth of Simon Chrystal and Paul Butler Inc. You couldn't do it, right? You need significant financial strength, because giving people advice is a risky business. It's risky for them, and if we make a mess of it, it's risky for us, because we have to make sure that they're in the position that they would have been if we hadn't messed up, okay? Sure. So you need that financial strength. Firms generally, when we were looking for investors, were not investing in financial advice companies at that time, certainly not startup financial advice customers. So I was introduced to Nigel Green, who is the owner effectively of DEA Group, and it is an interesting thing because you read lots of stuff and so on and so forth, but you've got to take people at face value and to what they want to contribute as well. And he believed in what we wanted to do. He felt that actually, if we got this right, that this was the way that financial advisors would run in the future, and he wanted to be part of that. So he invested via DEA Group in this business. He's been there if we've needed money at any point. Fortunately, there hasn't really been many of those instances, but we were a growing business and we were a fast growing business. He's never interfered. And I think that's really important, actually, because he's let us run it the way that we wanted to run it and the way that he invested in the first place. And so he continues to be a supporter. And because we have built a solid reputation, then of course DEA Group get the benefit of that. But he's never had a penny out of it so far, right? So he's invested, he's supported, he's let us run it, right? He's let us build this reputation and do things differently, but he hasn't had a return. Now, if you want to go looking for a shareholder, in my view, that's a one to find.
Simon Chrystal, CEO of WPS Advisory, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me and for listening to me.